Good evening, brethren. We're going to read Haggai. So we'll begin with verse 1. And it says, in the second year of Dariawesh, the sovereign, in the 6th month, in the second year of Dariawesh, the sovereign, in the 6th month, on the first day of the month, the word of Yahweh came by Haggai the prophet to Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, governor of Yehudah, and to Yahushua, son of Yahutzadak, the high priest. This right here is very important, in fact, from here. So we already see the names. That Yawesh means, which is right here, that Yawesh. It means sovereign. Haggai or Hagi, well, you can see there, actually, yeah, Haggai means my feast. Hag is feast, and Haggai, my feast. Then Zerubbabel, sown in confusion, born in Babel. Shealtiel, he who was asked of Yahweh, meaning the one that people asked for. Yahudah, the praise of Yahweh. Yahushua, the salvation of Yahweh. Yahutzadak, the righteousness of Yahweh, or Yahweh is righteous. So with that said, we could get from here that it says spiritually through the meanings of the names, as we always see, the sovereign during my feast, he who was born in Babel, confusion. With just that, we know that it refers to the last, to the second manifestation, because Yahushua was born in Israel. So Zerubbabel represents he who would be born outside of Israel, first and last, from the east and the west, for the presence of Yahweh would have to be known from, well, the east to the west, like the sun gives light to the whole of the earth, so would Yahweh manifest first in the east and then on the west at the end of times, like a thief in the night, just like when the sun goes down, which is the time when Lucifer, Hillel, would go down, as it is written in Revelation 12. So the sovereign during my feast, he who was born in confusion, in the apostasy within the nations, was whom the people asked for, which is connected to Malachi 3:1, where Yahweh prophesies the coming of Yahuhanandi in Mercer, which is Eliyahu, to prepare the way for the sovereign who would come to his temple, and then would come also the Malach of the covenant, the desired of nations. So it says the sovereign whom you seek and the Malach whom you desire. That is connected with the name Shealtiel. So once again, the sovereign during my feast is the one who is born in Babel, whom the people ask for to bring the praise to Yahweh and receive the salvation of Yahweh and his righteousness. So pretty much the Almighty Sovereign during a feast would manifest within the nations through the one who was born in confusion as the prodigal son, whom people have asked for, meaning the desired of nations, the Malach of the covenant of Malachi 3:1, who and also happens to be the second manifestation of Yahweh on this earth, just like the first, he was called Yahushua. The last, interestingly enough, we see in the book of Yirmiyahu that he will be called Yahweh Sidkenu. That will be a title that he will have. Yahweh Sidkenu, Yahweh our righteousness. That is pretty much another version of Yahutzadak, which we have right here, which is the righteousness of Yahweh. So the sovereign is he who during the feast, my feast, will manifest within the nations as he who was born in confusion, the apostasy, the prodigal son, whom the people asked for, the desired of nations, the malach of the covenant, who praises Yahweh as Yahushua to bring the salvation of Yahweh, being the righteousness of Yahweh. Therefore, Yahweh Sidkenu, Yahweh our righteousness, as the name prophesied in Yirmiyahu that he will receive. So we see through the meanings of these names right in the first verse that the Almighty is talking about the coming of the last during the end times, the second manifestation of Yahweh on this earth, which is interesting also when we compare it with the book of Zechariah, because there are two people who are mentioned. These are Zerubbabel and Yahushua. Zerubbabel was a governor. He would have been king, and Yahushua was high priest. So just that connects with the first and the last. As we know, Yahushua HaMashiach is the high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. Melchizedek, as in Yahud Sadak. Melchizedek means my king is righteousness. Yahud Sadak is Yahweh is righteousness. So Yahushua, son of Yahud Sadak, the high priest, represents, in one of the interpretations that I'm about to mention, Mashiach, high priest according to the order of Melchizedek, because Melchi, our king, is Yahweh. So Yahud Sadak. And the last is represented by Zerubbabel, because he comes as a prodigal son, born within the nations during the apostasy, and he is the desired of nations, whom the people asked for, who will rule as king. That's why governor from Yahudah over the Yahudim, those who worship Yahweh. So those two names represent first and last. In fact, we see in the book of Zechariah as well that they represent the two olive trees that are beside the right next to the sovereign of the whole earth. So there are a couple ways of seeing this, just like I mentioned, first and last, at the right and the left of the Most High, Yahweh. But another level would be the witness like Moshe and the witness like, the witness Eliyahu at the right and the left of Yahushua HaMashiach as the sovereign of the earth, just like during the transfiguration when Mashiach transfigured and Moshe and Eliyahu appeared right next to him. And in front of him were Keph or Peter, who represents Mashiach. That's why his name was the rock, the stone, because he represents the stone that the builders rejected. Then Yahuchanan, who represents Yahuchanan the immerser, meaning Eliyahu, who was there, and Jacob, who represents the witness like Moshe, who was by Yahushua as well. So Zerubbabel and Yahushua can be seen as the last and the first on a lower level, Moshe and Eliyahu, because just like Yahushua is the high priest, Hamashiach at the right hand of the Father, the last will be king on the earth, and Eliyahu, the priest. But also, another way of seeing this, since we just saw that all the names kind of refer to a person that will manifest within the nations, had the second manifestation to bring the righteousness of Yahweh and the praise of the Most High. Zerubbabel and Yahushua, as we see in the book of Zechariah, can be seen as one person. Because, as we know, the first coming of Yahweh to this earth, the first manifestation of Yahweh on this earth was as Yahushua, the first. As Yahweh says in Isaiah, I am the first and the last. So the last comes to bring righteousness, justice, judgment, unlike the first who came to bring mercy, the forgiveness of sins. So the fact that this one is named Yahushua, son of Yahutzadak, refers to as if Yahushua would come again. Like, for instance, Christians are expecting the same exact person coming back again, but as we know, is not exactly like that, as we see in scriptures. But still, Yahushua, when he came as the son, and he said that he would come once again, and he would not leave us as orphans. So that means that the first time he came as, meaning Yahweh came as a son, the son, and the last comes as the father. For the chosen few, 144,000 wouldn't be left as orphans. So, Yahushua, son of Yahuzadak, represents the second manifestation of Yahweh on this earth, just like the first was Yahushua, now coming to bring righteousness. That's why son of Yahuzadak, as saying that now is the time for Yahushua to come, but to bring righteousness. Not only that, and for that, I'm going to have to go to Zechariah chapter 4. And I'll just read here, but if we were to go to Revelation 11, there's where it says that the two witnesses are the two olive trees, and the two olive trees are mentioned in Zechariah 4. And well, this is a very important one. And it says, I'll just read a part of it. Verse 9, the hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house, and his hands shall complete it. So that represents, other than what we are about to read as well in Haggai regarding Zerubbabel coming to build the temple, now the last coming to build the spiritual temple, meaning Yahweh choosing through him the 144,000. So each one of those are a stone in the temple. So the hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation. That would be like the last coming and beginning the ministry of 3 years and a half, 1,260 days, as the book of Revelation says. So the hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of his house, and his hands shall complete it. And you shall know that Yahweh of hosts has sent me to you. For who has despised the day of small beginnings, they shall rejoice when they see the plumb line in the hand of Zerubbabel. So those who have despised pretty much this reality, obviously it has a literal interpretation referring to the building of the second temple, but that is that also has a spiritual interpretation. And like I said, those who have despised the day of small beginnings, this reality, they shall rejoice when they see the plumb line in the hand of Zerubbabel, when they see the last coming to judge, represented by the plumb line. These seven are the eyes of Yahweh, just like the seven congregations which are below the seven angels, as mentioned in Revelation 2 and 3, which diligently search throughout all the earth. Then I responded and said to him, what are these olive trees? One at the right of the lampstand and the other at its left. And I responded a second time and said to him, what are these two olive branches which empty golden oil, that is pretty much the Ruach HaKodesh, from themselves by means of the two gold pipes? And he answered me and said, do you not know what these are? And I said, no, my sovereign. And he said, these are the two anointed ones who stand beside the sovereign of all the earth. So the two anointed ones, that, like I said, can be interpreted as the first and the last. Mashiach, which means anointed, Mashiach ben Yahudah, and Mashiach ben Yahusef, or Yosef. At the right and the left, respectively, according to what we see, well, throughout the entire scriptures, but in Isaiah specifically. But also it refers to the two witnesses, as we see in Revelation 11, the two anointed ones who stand beside the sovereign of all the earth. Then, if we continue in this chapter, in fact, there is a translation that has a comment regarding this chapter that I find interesting, because it says that this event that we see here portrayed was supposed to happen with Zerubbabel, but for some reason he doesn't appear in the scene. So according to the commentators, he wasn't around, so Zechariah had to do the prophetical sign through Yahushua, the high priest, instead of Zerubbabel. However, I don't think that's completely right. I think that Yahweh told him to do it with Yahushua because of what that would represent, because the second manifestation of Yahweh on this earth would be through the last as a prodigal son, who, when he dies and resurrects, becomes one with Mashiach, as, for instance, Ezekiel 37 prophesies. So when the first and the last become one, that is, for instance, when Mashiach, as he said in Revelation, he will get a new name because he will become one with the last. That is when also in Revelation says that Yahushua will give to he who overcomes the morning star. And at the end of Revelation, Yahushua says, I am the morning star. So there are several parts in scriptures where we can see that the first and the last become one. So the last first comes to the world through the nations, as a Gentile, as a thief in the night, dressed in red, as we see in Isaiah 63, meaning as Asaph, just like when Yaakov dressed as his brother Asaph in order to enter the room of his father and get the blessing that he was supposed to give according to what he thought to Asaph. However, Yaakov had bought the blessing, so he went in and took that blessing that was actually for him. So that's why, just like Yitzhak was offered, almost sacrificed by Abraham, but Abraham said that Yahweh would give instead a lamb, and he did when he sent Mashiach as the lamb. Then Yaakov represents the second manifestation, the last. So, like I said, in fact, Yaakov, his name is changed to Israel, which that represents also as well that the last would come with a name, then he will receive another name, which is, like I said, the name that Yahushua says that he will receive, a new name. So part of that is confirmed or prophesied here in this chapter. Now I have a, well, I'm going to read, I guess I have to, I will read the whole thing, but I will do it real quick because we are in the book of Haggai. So it's just to explain what we are seeing in Haggai. So, and he showed me Yahushua. So this is also one of the two people in scriptures who are given the name of the Messiah in a moment in order to prophesy, to give a prophetical sign of the coming of the first and the last. That's why Moshe's successor, his name was Hoshea, but Yahweh added a letter to him through Moshe, and his name became Yahushua. So he got the name of the first manifestation of Yahweh on this earth, but his genealogy was that of the last manifestation of Yahweh on this earth through Ephraim. Now, in this case, we have Yahushua again. His name, as we saw in the previous studies in Ezra and Nehemiah, his name was Yeshua. But when Yahweh speaks in Zechariah prophetically to show us the name of the Messiah, he adds a letter as well to his name and turns it into Yahushua. Not just salvation, Yeshua, but the salvation, Shua, of Yahweh, Yahushua. So these are the two people because we need two witnesses or three in order to confirm the truth. So Yahweh gave us two witnesses. Hoshea, who became Yahushua, the successor of Moshe, and Yeshua, who became Yahushua, his name, I mean, in the book of Zechariah, to represent as well the name of Mashiach. But in this case, we see something very interesting because we know that Yahushua came through a virgin. Yahushua HaMashiach came through a virgin. He didn't have sin in his flesh. That's why Satan had to go and tempt him when he was 40 days in the desert. Just like the serpent tempted Hava in the garden, and she fell, and then Adam fell, and then sin entered the flesh of all humans except for Mashiach, who came to a virgin. And there's the reason why he didn't have sin in his flesh, even though he came from a virgin, because the chromosomes in a female are XX, in a male are XY. Sin entered through men, not through the female, because the man is the head. So by eating, he cursed the Y and the X that was within him. So that X that he cursed is one of the two X's in the female's chromosomes. The other X that the female had was left untouched, and he was left untouched so that when Mashiach would come, Yahweh would use that X in order to build the body for Mashiach within the virgin, so that he wouldn't have that cursed other chromosome, or X in this case. So, and Yahweh pretty much put the Y in order to make him male. So Yahushua came without sin. He was tempted. He didn't fall. So he then went, preached, did his miracles, proved that he was who he is, the Son of Yahweh, and then was sacrificed for our sins. But in this chapter, we see an image of Yahushua in a different light. And this is important because this also confirms, and hopefully Celio is around, what we see through the prodigal son parable. And I say that because I think Celio likes that parable. So it says here, and he showed me Yahushua the high priest. Yahushua HaMashiach is the high priest. But here he's about to receive crowns. So he's about to become king. So it represents Yahushua the first, who already is high priest, coming through the last, his messenger, the Malach of the covenant, to become king, king of kings, and sovereign of sovereigns, as we see in Revelation 19, when he's dressed in red, in fact. So, and he showed me Yahushua the high priest standing before the messenger of Yahweh, and Satan is standing at his right hand to be an adversary to him. Satan standing at his right hand to be an adversary to him. So it is like in judgment. Yahushua is being judged. Satan is accusing him. We could say that the judge is in front, Yahweh. That's why Satan is at the right hand of Yahushua, because he would be at the left hand of the judge, because he will be accusing. And Michael, the Malach of Yahweh, at the left hand of he who is accused, but at the right hand of Yahweh, the judge. Now, like I said, the last is actually the messenger, is Michael. And the first name is Yahushua. But because of what I already explained and the way Yahweh is speaking through this chapter, we can pretty much say that Yahushua, like I already said, represents the last, because he is the human and he has sin, as we are about to see. And the messenger of Yahweh is advocating for him, like the lawyer that Yahushua became as our intercessor. So the messenger of Yahweh in this case can be seen as Yahushua, our intercessor, at the right hand of the Father, and therefore the left hand of he who is accused. And Yahushua, as in the last, coming to the earth to become king, being accused by Satan. Then it says, and Yahweh said to Satan, Yahweh rebuke you, Satan. Yahweh said to Satan, that is the Malach, Michael, because if it was Yahweh himself, he would not have said this in the third person. Yahweh rebuke you. He would just say, I rebuke you, right? So we see that is Michael, and he is so respectful of the honor of Yahweh that even when he represents Yahweh, speaks in the third person to rebuke Satan, who is an angel like him. So, and Yahweh said to Satan, Yahweh rebuke you, Satan. Yahweh who has chosen Jerusalem rebuke you. In this is important, is this not a brand plucked from the fire? Is this not a brand plucked from the fire? We could say, of course, that Mashiach was taken out of Sheol when he resurrected, but he was not going to the fire. Even if he were to stay in Sheol, he would have been in paradise because he conquered death. This is referring to a person that is being accused by Satan, and therefore he would be going to the fire if not for Yahweh rebuking Satan through the Malach of Yahweh. So it is like Yahweh taking the sin of the last so that he can become king. Now I continue. And Yahushua was dressed in filthy garments and was standing before the messenger. So another thing, is this not a brand plucked from the fire? If you take a brand plucked from the fire, that would be on fire. Yahushua is the water of life. The last is the consuming fire. And in fact, he comes as represented by wood, like a tree that gives fruit of the knowledge of the Father, because Yahushua is his roots, the root of David and the branch of David, first and last, right? So Yahushua is the root, as we see throughout scriptures. He himself said it, not with that same word, but he meant it when he was talking to the Pharisees regarding whose son was Mashiach. So is this not a brand plucked from the fire? That is Yahweh saying that the last is represented by wood, that he is the consuming fire, and that he was going to the fire, except that he believed in Mashiach, who died for our sins. So, and Yahushua was dressed in filthy garments. As we know, Yahushua never sinned, so he never had filthy garments. A garment represents the body, the flesh. Yahushua never had the inclination to evil, so he didn't have filthy garments. In fact, that's why he came, in order to give us clean garments, which are his flesh. Remember, in Hebrew, basar is flesh, besorot, good news, is the plural of flesh, or what we eat from the animals. So that's why the Messiah gave his flesh as the lamb, so that we could eat through our belief in him and receive garments that are clean without the inclination to evil, like the ones that we received from our first father, Adam. So the fact that he had filthy garments represents that Yahushua, meaning the last in this case, has to manifest as the prodigal son, unlike the first manifestation, and was standing before the messenger. And he answered and spoke to those who stood before him, saying, remove the filthy garments from him. So Yahweh is removing the sin from the last. And to him he said, see, I have removed your guilt from you. You see how this, in fact, confirms what I was saying. He had filthy garments. Remove the filthy garments. And then he says, I removed your guilt. So that shows that the filth is the guilt. So filthy garments, a body with guilt because of sin. But Yahweh takes it away through the messenger, in this case, Yahushua HaMashiach. And to him he said, see, I have removed your guilt from you and shall put costly robes on you. And I said, let them put a clean turban on his head. Then they put a clean turban on his head, and they put garments on him. And the messenger of Yahweh stood by. And the messenger of Yahweh witnessed to Yahushua, saying, thus said Yahweh of hosts, if you walk in my ways and if you guard my duty, then you shall also rule my house. Also, as in other than high priest, you will also rule. He came as high priest, now as king. My house, as in his people, and as well heaven, and earth, and also guard my courts. And I shall give you access among these standing here. Now listen, Yahushua, the high priest, you and your companions who sit before you. So that is as the last and the few who learned from the last as the good shepherd. Now listen, Yahushua, the high priest, and you and your companions who sit before you, for they are men of symbol. So he's saying that the people that were before Yahushua, as well as Yahushua himself, they were all acting as a symbol. Yahweh was creating something that represented what would happen in the future, the coming of the last. So this is just a symbol, this chapter, I mean. For look, I am bringing forth my servant, the branch. Right? So the root and the branch cannot be first. That is obvious. And Yahushua proved it when he talked to the Pharisees. The root is what's first. That's why Mashiach came as the word of Yahweh, and through the parable of the seed, the sower, we know that the seed is the word of Yahweh. So the Messiah is the seed that came to the earth to be killed in order to become the root that would grow as a tree that was cut by the iron of Rome, but then would give fruit through a branch that would come at the end of times, as prophesied in Isaiah 11. So it says, for look, I am bringing forth my servant, the branch. See the stone which I have put before Yahushua. This is important, very important. As we know, Yahushua HaMashiach, the first, is the stone, the first stone, cornerstone, etc. But here, it doesn't say that Yahushua is the stone. It says that he put a stone before Yahushua. Who comes before the last? Obviously the first, and that is the stone. So Yahweh is saying that before the last, represented by Yahushua here. So we could say, and I don't like to say that as I'm going to say it, just because people may interpret it the wrong way. But we can see here that this represents the second coming of Yahushua. However, the way he will do that second coming is remaining on the right hand of the Father, opening the first seal, and allowing the second manifestation of Yahweh to happen on the earth. In fact, when Yahushua said to the Pharisees, whose son is Messiah, they said, son of David. And Yahushua said, how can he be the son of David if David himself, in Psalm 110, says, Yahweh said to my sovereign, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies as your footstool. So how can he be his son if he calls him sovereign? David says, Yahweh said to my sovereign. So David is talking in Psalm 110, prophesying of Mashiach already being at the right hand of the Father. So that happened after he died and resurrected and went to the right hand. So David is prophesying of something that would come afterwards. And David himself is saying that there were two powers in heaven above him, Yahweh and his sovereign, meaning Yahushua the Messiah. So Yahushua tells this to the Pharisees to tell them that they don't know what they're talking about. The Messiah cannot be the son of David. He has to be the root of David, because everything came through the word, and that is the root of creation. Now, the fact that he came genetically through Yahudah, that's another deal, but he was talking spiritually. He wanted them to know the deepest truth regarding where he comes from and who he is in the whole scheme of things when we see scriptures. Yeah, the prophetical, well, everything that is prophesied in him. So he is the root, and Psalm 110, Yahweh said, sit at my right hand. He is there sitting already. And there is where he's going to open the first seal, as we see in Revelation 6. And Yahweh says, sit at my right hand until I, Yahweh says, put your enemies, meaning Satan, who killed him and wanted to take what is his, till I put your enemies as your footstool. Scripture says that the throne is the heavens and the footstool is the earth. So Yahweh is saying, sit in heaven, remain here until I go back to the earth once again, but this time as the Father, in order to bring Satan down to the earth, which is the footstool. So that is the second manifestation, this time as the branch. So that's why it says, see the stone, that is Mashiach, the first cornerstone, which I have put before. He came 2,000 years before the last. That I have put before Yahushua. On one stone are 7 eyes. He has all knowledge. He is above the 7 congregations and above the 7 malachim. See, I am engraving its inscription, declares Yahweh of hosts, and I shall remove the guilt of the land, of that land, in one day. We can say through the death of Mashiach, which happened one day, 15th of Aviv, guilt was taken away. The accuser is not able to destroy us through his accusation. However, he continues to accuse. So the other way in which we can interpret this is referring to the time when Satan will fall down, as Revelation 12 says, that now the accuser from that time on won't be able to accuse us anymore. And once the accuser is out, the guilt will be over. For instance, I think we all know that after we have repented and Yahweh has forgiven us, the enemy will still try to bring guilt. He will still try to remind us of what we did, what we already prayed for, what we already repented of, etc. But he tries to keep us under that weight of guilt that Yahweh already took away from us through Mashiach. So once Satan is out, that guilt will be over. In that day, declares Yahweh of hosts, you shall invite one another under the vine and under the fig tree, meaning under the tree of life and under the tree of knowledge, those of Israel and those of Yahudah, through the first who said, I am the vine, and the last who brings the knowledge. And in a way, we could say that he had to come as a prodigal son, and that was represented by the time when Mashiach cursed the fig tree. So we read a whole chapter already. Let's go back to Haggai. So, well, just in case there are questions, since you read it in Zechariah when it says Semach, the branch, how do you connect it with Genesis 49:22 when it calls Yosef ben Parah? Unless the whole doctrine is clear, I found you need many connections to get to connect Semach with ben Parah. Not sure if I understood, but well, first of all, well, I guess you're talking about the branch, the word branch, but let me show it on here. Let me see. So first I'll show you guys the word that he uses for branch here. Servant, the branch, that is verse 8. Go to verse 8, and we have here, Semach. So the Tzadeh, which is the first letter of Tzadik as well, Tzedekah, righteousness, represents a righteous person. Then the Mem, which is that of first letter of Mashiach, anointed. It represents a fountain, a source. And then the Chet, which is a wall, a separation. So pretty much the righteous, anointed one who comes to separate the sheep from the goats, few from the many, etc. And also the numerical value would be 138. Now let's go to Genesis 49. And we go to the prophecy of Yosef. And well, first of all, and hopefully I'm understanding your question, so hopefully I'll answer with what I'm saying. In the book, I mean, in Genesis 49, when the blessing is given to Yahudah, as you can see here, Yahudah is a lion's cub, well, etc. The two bigger, the biggest blessings given in Genesis 49 are to Yahudah, which is all of this. And you can see that the rest only get pretty much one verse or a couple, depending on the tribe. But then it goes to Joseph, and once again, it's a lot, right? So just that gives us a sign that something important or somebody important would come from each of those two tribes, which is part of what the Jewish people get to believe in two messiahs. Other than that, you can see that and we're about to see the Hebrew, but with the translation and even with the Hebrew, of course, but I'll show why or how. It refers to Joseph as a branch, as an offshoot, which is a synonym. So it may not be exactly the same word used here and there, but it's referring to the same part of a tree, the same part of a plant. Yahushua is the root. That's why Yahudah is the blessing given before that of Yosef at the beginning of the chapter, the first half, because he will come as the root, the first from Yahudah. It doesn't mention anything regarding branch, no word that would be a synonym, but it does so when it comes to Joseph. So Joseph is an offshoot of a fruit-bearing tree, an offshoot of a fruit-bearing tree by a fountain. You see, by a fountain. How interesting. A person that is by a fountain, as in the last Yahweh Kenu by Mashiach is able to separate. So by a fountain, his branches run over a wall. So we have the whole verse talking about Joseph being a branch. Let's go to verse 22 here in Hebrew. And it says, Ben Porat, right? So this Porat, we're about to see it. It can be translated as several things. We could, from that, we can get that he's a branch or an offshoot. Also that he's a, well, offshoot because he has Ben right here, which is a son, as in a branch that comes out in a plant is also called a son. In this case, Ben Porat. Because of Par and Tav can be seen as the ox who comes at the end. The ox who dies on Yom Kippur, the last end of the year. Par is the bull that was sacrificed on Yom Kippur, I repeat, and the Tav represents the sacrifice, the seal that he will put on the chosen few, etc. But also connects with a donkey. Ben, as in the one that Mashiach rode on to enter Jerusalem. And he was called king because that shows that the last, a Ben Porat, would have the presence of Mashiach over him, making him the throne, because Mashiach entered on a donkey to represent kingship, because that's how kings would ride, humble, and also judges. So there are several ways in which we can interpret this, the Porat. But then we have again Porat, and it says Tzada as well. So Genesis 49. So here we have a bow, and here branches. The bow, which would be the offshoot. Oh, it gave me bend. So in this case, oh yeah, this is interesting. Yeah. So this is the reason why. Here Porat, like I was saying, Ben Porat. You just saw how I clicked on both or offshoot and it gave me Ben, son, as each branch being a son of the root. Porat is given fruitful. Now, peri is fruit. So that's why son of fruits or son that gives fruit would be a pretty literal translation of those two words. Also, par is the root, in this case, peri, of fruit, is the root of Ephraim, fruitful. So that's why he would be using this, because it would be also a confirmation that the descendant of Joseph who would manifest to accomplish this, that Yahweh is prophesying through the blessing of Joseph, he would do it through Ephraim, not through Menashe. So that's a way of prophesying through which of the sons of Joseph this would manifest. But then let me go back. So that was not it. Here it is, para. You see how it says bear fruit, be fruitful, branch off, to bear fruit, because it is the branch that holds the fruit, cause to bear fruit, etc. So that is the word there. So it is a synonym of semach. Let me go to Zechariah 3. The branch, semach, sprout, growth, branch, sprouting, growth. So ben para makes reference to the fruit that comes out of the branch. Semach refers to the root of the branch, pretty much. The wood that comes out of the trunk. Now, I want to make this clear just in case, because this is what most people think, that he would come from David in the physical. But when Mashiach manifested through David in the physical, he asked the Pharisees, whose son is Mashiach? And they said David. They should have said Yahweh. They said David. So he told them that he was the root, not the branch. And they never asked him ever again after that moment, because they were confused. Because the branch comes after, the root comes first. So actually the Messiah from the Davidic tree would actually be the root of that tree, not the branch, sprout of shoot. That would be the last. Then we had here Ben. Let me see something else. Here it says branches, and it's referring to daughters. Just like the branch would be a son, a Ben, the little branches that come out of that one would be banot, or daughters. All the things that can be said there, but let me just go to Isaiah 11 as well, because there are many other chapters that refer to the same person, but use different terms for different reasons to give more knowledge or understanding of what he's prophesying. Here we have that it says, and there shall come forth a rod. Let's look at that one. Out of the stem of Yishai, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. So we have a couple terms here. Choter, branch, twig, rod. You see another synonym. And we know that it is a branch because of also the context, out of the stem. So it makes sense. The gezah, stem, trunk, stalk of trees specifically. So if something comes out of that, it will be a branch, in this case, like a twig. And that will show also the last as little. But then we have here netzer. Netzer, sprout, shoot, branch, another synonym. Right? In this case, there are connections. Remember that I always say that what one fulfills spiritually, the other one fulfills it physically. Yahushua, or literally. Yahushua literally came from Netzaret. So he was a Netzar by the name of the place where he came from. That's why those who believe in him are Netzarim or Notzrim, branches that come out of him who is the root, right? So there are reasons why each word is used. But once again, I repeat, Netzer, you see, branch, shoot. Nun, Tzadeh, Reish. The last comes from a person named Nun, son of Ephraim, like a seed that falls like the prodigal son, but then becomes a Sadiq or a righteous person in order to become the head of the congregation. Just there we saw Netzer, Ben Porat, Netzach, Tzemach, and Choter. 4. And I don't know if we may get so a 5th, perhaps Banot, daughters. But remember when I explained also in the Spanish study of Genesis 49, I explained also a different translation in which it would speak about Joseph being a son of a ox or a donkey, depending on how we want to see that word, porat. And also that the daughters of the Egyptians were getting on top of the wall trying to see Joseph because they loved his appearance, at least. So then it continues, and then in verse 10 it says, and in that day, meaning the end times, there shall be a root, that is Yahushua HaMashiach. In the end times, there's already a root. Here it is. The root of Yishai, which shall stand for an ensign, just like Mashiach stands at the right hand of the Father, for an ensign of the people. To it shall the Gentiles seek, as in Malachi 3:1, the sovereign whom you seek shall come to the temple. But then he died, resurrected, and went to the right hand of the Father. Here he says, seek. He is at the right hand of the Father. He is the root whom you seek. And his rest shall be esteemed. And it shall come to pass in that day, once again, the end of days, while the root is standing at the right hand as an ensign whom they seek. It shall come to pass in that day, while the Messiah is in the heavens, that Yahweh shall send his hand again, as in second manifestation. Now, when I speak about Yahushua being the arm and the last being the hand, in that case, it will be referring, like if we interpret it that way, the context will be referring to a second Exodus, because Yahweh used his hand during the first Exodus. So the fact that he says his hand again refers to a second Exodus. So the second manifestation, when the second Exodus happened, Yahweh shall set his hand again the second time, second manifestation, to recover the remnant, as in the Exodus, recover the chosen few of his people, which shall be left from Ashur and from Egypt and from Patros and from Cush and from Elam and from Shinar and from Hamad and from the islands of the sea. And he continues. So, well, there's more in this chapter, but I'm not going to read the whole thing because hopefully you got something from there, Sally. If not, let me know. I'll read the question again. Since you read in the Zechariah when it says Semach, the branch, how do you connect it with Genesis 49:22 when it calls Joseph Ben Para? Unless the whole doctrine is clear, I find you need many connections to get to connect Semach with Ben Para. Like I said, I guess through the fact of synonyms that they exist is a way of connecting them. If you mean that most, like, because I wouldn't say most people, but if you mean the fact that some people translate Joseph, the blessing for Joseph in Genesis 49:22 different, I already explained that difference. And like I also said, even if we were not to take Genesis 49, we have Isaiah 11. And still it doesn't mention Semach. But he mentions the same prophecy using other words. So Semach appears in these verses. Obviously, not all have to do with the coming of the last. Well, there are many, so I'm not going to get into them. But we could find other parts that prophetically connect with that. And through the context, we can show how it refers to the coming of the last. Look how it says, for the earth brings forth its bud, and the garden causes the seed to shoot up. So the sovereign Yahweh causes righteousness, as in Yahweh Tzidkenu, and praise to shoot up before all the nations. As a branch before all the nations, Mashiach came through Israel. The last comes from the nations. For as the earth brings forth its bud, and the garden causes the seed to shoot up, so the sovereign Yahweh causes righteousness and praise to shoot up before all the nations. Well, and in fact, yeah, we could continue reading and reading, and we would see more and more confirmations. Here it says, there I make the horn of David grow. This will be Tzemach. So the Tzemach, the branch, is the horn, and that is the king. Yahushua came as the high priest. I shall set up a lamp for my anointed one. Yahushua is that lamp, is the light itself. So that anointed one refers to David, who is the king. And David said that he has a sovereign next to the Father. So that means Yahushua, the root. So, yeah, hopefully that's enough, brother. But if not, let me know. And Choter of Isaiah 11, the same word used for Ezekiel 37 for the two sticks. It's a good one, brother. Here it tells him, take the one stick that is eights. So it refers to tree or a stick of wood. Eights. And I would say it uses this term instead of the other ones that we just saw, because it refers to a sacrifice. It refers to the first and the last being sacrificed, and after the sacrifice being united, becoming one. Those two 18, those two trees or sticks. And if he were to use netzer or tzemach or choter or the other ones, it would be connecting both of them to the branch. Yet, as I explained, the first is the root, the last is the branch. But the first died on an etz. He died on a tree, etz. So the etz of Yahudah refers to the sacrifice of Yahushua. Tree, wood, timber, stock, plank, stock, etc. It says gallows. That's where Mashiach was hanged. So let's get to verse 2. It's not my fault. So, in the second year of Dariyahush, the sovereign, in the 6th month of the first day of the month. The 6th month, I'm not going to go from this verse, is the month of Elul. That is an important month. You have here Elul, the 6th month. The whole month is a month of purification. This 31 days plus the first 9 days. That's why in the afternoon of the 9th, we begin a fast all the way to the afternoon of the 10th, when we celebrate Yom Kippur, which is the day when the two witnesses will be killed. That's why there is a purification the first 40 days. It is quite possible that those were the 40 days that Mashiach was in the desert. And then he was tempted during Yom Kippur. So that's why Yom Kippur is a day of judgment. He was being judged through the temptation. He was being tested. He passed the test, and then he began right away his ministry. So if we count 3.5 years from Yom Kippur, we reached Pesach, which is when he was captured and killed on Matzot. So the first 40 days he would have been in the desert. That would have been Elul in the first 9 of Etanim. Not only that, it is interesting that Elul is the month of Virgo. Virgo represents the virgin, and a virgin is pure. That's why there is a time for the congregation, the virgin, to purify herself during this month. And as we know, Hanok prophesied that in the end times, the constellations would reach late. And that is why nowadays, during the 7th month, which is a month of judgment, that's why it's the month of Libra. That's why we have here Yom Kippur, Day of Judgment. But nowadays, because of that movement of the stars, during most of the 7th month, we actually have Virgo, because Pisces goes to the first month, Aries to the second, Taurus to the third, etc., etc., etc. So therefore, Virgo is on the 7th, which is interesting because it confirms what we see in Revelation 12, when the virgin goes to the mountains, flees to the wilderness, and the serpent goes after her. That chapter begins with a vision that Yahushua had in the heavens of Virgo being dressed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars, that being Leo and 3 more stars, meaning planets that would align to make a crown. The fact that Virgo would be in the heavens during that time is important because it confirms that that chapter will happen in our time, because it is in our time that the 7th month is when the sun is in Virgo, which didn't happen back in the day. So Yahushua prophesying saw through a vision that in the end times, the sun would be in Virgo during the 7th month. And we know that because that is when the congregation will have to flee to the mountains during the day of Sukkot, which is the 15th of the 7th. Is a time to go and live in Sukkot, as they call it, tabernacles in the mountains. It represents the Exodus, is when the second Exodus will manifest, because the first Exodus happened during Matzot. So now we have a reflection on the 7th month. I was just showing this so that we understand that these 40 days are a time of purification, which are a time in which they were here in the 2nd year, Darius the sovereign, in the 6th month, that is Elul, purification, on the 1st day of the month. So on the day when the purification begins, the word of Yahweh came by Haggai, my feast, the prophet, to Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, governor of Yehudah, and to Yahushua, son of Yahutzadak, the high priest. So it is like Yahweh saying that he's sending a prophecy to the 2 witnesses. He's sending a word to the 2 witnesses to prepare them, as in purify them for the time of the ministry. Thus spoke Yahweh of hosts, saying, these people have said, the time has not come. The time the house of Yahweh is to be built. As we know through Ezra and Nehemiah, the people were, well, some people were against the temple being built, just like a lot of people are against the temple being built at the moment. And spiritually, most people are against Yahweh building his temple through his people. So in general, most people in the world say it is not the time for Yahweh to enter this world. It is not the time for the end times to come. It is not the time for the spiritual, because they're so focused in the fear that the media provides them. So thus spoke Yahweh of hosts, saying, these people have said the time has not come, the time the house of Yahweh is to be built. Then the word of Yahweh, this is important because in Genesis we see Yahweh Elohim. Then we see Yahweh Sabaoth manifesting. Then through the prophets, we see the word of Yahweh coming to them. So it is Yahweh getting closer and closer to humanity. First, Yahweh Elohim through certain Malachim called the authorities, the Elohim. Then Yahweh Tzabaoth through a different administration of Malachim, a different set of Malachim who were in charge of bringing judgment, bringing justice to those who were being rebellious, those who were accused by the enemy, with the Torah, of course, the law of this world. And then the word of Yahweh, Mashiach, before coming in the flesh, started appearing, not necessarily as a human or as a person, although he also did that, but he started appearing and talking to the prophets. That's why the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Mashiach. Now, we also have other prophets where we don't find these words exactly like this. The word of Yahweh came to or by. So that means that with those prophets, Yahweh was still manifesting through an angel, a malach. So we see him getting closer and closer, just like he said to Moshe that before Moshe, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Jacob only knew him as El Shaddai. But after Moshe, they began to call him by his name, Yahweh. So that represents, once again, him getting closer and closer, not using angels, but now using his son. So the word of Yahweh came by Haggai, the prophet, saying, is it time for you yourselves to dwell in your paneled houses and this house be in ruins? So they were so focused on themselves as humanity nowadays that they didn't care at all about the Father, about serving the Father, because according, like if we just look at the letter, they couldn't do much of the law without the temple being built. So they didn't really care about fulfilling the law, because in the letter, they need the temple to fulfill the whole of the law. So Yahweh is, by saying this, noticing how the people really didn't care about the law, just like nowadays. Is it time for you yourselves to dwell in your panel houses and this house be in ruins? He's also trying to awaken that which was within the heart of David when he said, how is it that I live in this palace and I haven't built a house for the Almighty? He's still in a tent. So Yahweh told him that he liked that idea that he had, that he felt great about the desire of David, but that it wouldn't be for him to build it, but instead for his son, Shlomo, representing the son of David that would come at the end as the branch and build. Because Shlomo was called the son of David. When Mashiach has the Pharisees, who is the son of David, or who is Mashiach, they said the son of David. So therefore, to the Pharisees, Shlomo was a representation of Mashiach. However, Yahushua said, no, I am the root, not the branch. So Shlomo represents the branch. Is it time for you yourselves to dwell in your panel houses and this house be in ruins? And now, thus said Yahweh of hosts, consider your ways. This is important. Consider your ways, because Yahushua is the way of Yahweh. So if Yahweh is telling them, consider your ways, is because the people have different ways of doing things, different ways of going to the Father, different denominations that are not the true way to the Father. And that's why all roads lead to Rome, the great whore from whom all abominations came to the earth. All different denominations, even those who claim not to be connected with, if they have a connection through the doctrine, then they are part of daughters of the great whore. And now thus said Yahweh of hosts, consider your ways. You have sown much, but brought in little. Eat, but do not have enough. Drink, but you are not filled with drink. Clothe yourselves, but no one is warm. And he who earns wages to put into a bag with holes. This is the situation of most people in the world, sadly. And it is talking about the literal, but also the spiritual, of course, which is more important. People don't have enough. And even when they do, they are not satisfied. So it's like not having enough. That's how they feel. Because there are a lot of rich people who are crazy in their lives, working and working and working, making more money because they think they don't have enough. They feel they don't have enough. They feel that they have to have more in order to be more important or whatever, to have shalom, which is not true. Others really don't have much, of course, and that is the greater reality of most, because of the system in which we live, which was allowed by people going away from the Creator. By going away from justice, they encounter injustice. And it is what is ruling over the earth. So you have sown much, but brought in little. We are in the end times. A lot of people are sowing and they are not seeing anything come out of the ground, or just a little bit. We know there's talks of hunger, famine in the earth. Most of it has been provoked by the system, by the enemy, by the Illuminati, however you want to call it. But there is famine, and it will get worse next year. You have sown much, but brought in little. Also, in the spiritual, a lot of people go to congregations, Christian churches, and they sow money and sow money and sow money and see nothing in their lives. Neither what they expect, which is to have more money, nor what they should have to have more knowledge, because knowledge and wisdom is greater than silver and gold. So if a person goes to a church and doesn't get knowledge, wisdom, doesn't get to know the Father, then what is that person doing there? Because what that person, perhaps what that person wants is just to live in this reality, thinking that he has earned heaven and hopefully get a lot of money from it. Sadly, that's pretty much like the mindset of most people. Most, not all. I understand there are some people in those churches trying to seek the Father, but they just don't know where to go or anything like that, which is sad. And they should pray about it, but they don't, because they lack faith or other things. So you have sown much, but brought in little. Eat, but do not have enough. And that is also, well, in the literal, connects with the anxiety in which a lot of people live. They don't ever have enough. They have to be eating all the time, continually, until having issues, overweight issues and stuff like that. And that has to do with anxiety, being worried, other things that we should give to the Father. There is a saying in Judaism that, not exactly like that, just in case, but referring to the person who eats all the time always has his stomach empty. So the more you eat, the more you will need to eat. If you eat a little bit, all of a sudden you will adjust to it. Your stomach will get smaller. If you eat a lot, your stomach will get bigger, and then it will need more. So you will always be hungry. So it is something to keep in mind, to not let the flesh, the stomach, control the mind. Eat, but do not have enough. So we should pray for the Almighty to make us feel satisfied, even with little, if possible. Drink, but you are not filled with drink. Even the people who drink, they want to drink until they fall on their faces, right? They don't have enough until they are the next day complaining about everything that they did the previous day, if they remember it. Then clothe yourselves, but no one is warm. Their heart is cold. How can they get warm through clothing? Scripture said that the love of many would grow cold. And that's what has happened. Clothe yourselves, but no one is warm. And he who earns wages to put into a bag with holes. Everything that people are doing is for nothing, is for the fire. What they are building, what they are creating, what they are expecting, they are preparing it for a fire. Earn wages to put into a bag with holes. People get their money and it's not enough. Taxes take most of it. So once again, the system stealing from his people, claiming it is for their own good, for their security. Earns wages to put into a bag with holes. Thus said Yahweh of hosts, consider your ways. So that means that it is because of the ways that people follow that this happens. But if you tell them that Yahushua is the way, they will go back to that, angry at us. They will go back to the way that they know and have and appreciate so much, because sadly they are blinded. Thus said Yahweh of hosts, consider your ways. Go up to the mountain, as in seek the kingdom of Yahweh first and his righteousness, and all things shall be added to you. The mountain represents the kingdom of Yahweh. So go up to the mountain and you shall bring wood and build a house. Wood, because the chosen few are trees. The many are the land, the earth, well, the soil, and the nations are the sea. The few are wood because they will be used to build the house of Yahweh. And I will be pleased with it, and let me be esteemed, said Yahweh. When you looked for much, then see, it came to little. When you looked for much, then see, it came to little. Once again, those who are focusing on this world, on getting much pleasure, money, fame, power in this world, they will eventually see that it came to nothing. They see little of what they expected through all their hard work. And when you brought it home, I would blow on it. Why? Declares Yahweh of hosts, because of my house which lies in ruins, while each of you runs to his own house. So nobody cares about the Most High. And when I say nobody, I mean, you know what I mean, right? Most people, sadly. If it was everybody, we wouldn't be here. So sadly, most people don't care. They run to their pleasure, to their jobs, to their houses, to their comfort. And they are not thinking what's going on with the Most High, what's going on with the Creator. And remember that the temple is our body. So it is like saying you go your own way and you don't allow me to enter your heart. You don't allow me to fill you with the presence of the Ruach. So because of my house, which lies in ruins, while each of you runs to his own house. So it is like the two inclinations in the heart. The good inclination, the house of Yahweh, but it lies in ruins because they have not built it up through Mashiach, that is the cornerstone. They have not built up their good part of the heart that Yahweh gave us in order to be able to control the bad part of the heart. Instead, they feed the bad part of the heart. So the good one is in ruins, has no power. And then they say, how can I do this? How can I do that? I have no power. I have no control. Why? Because they are not allowing Yahweh to enter and strengthen those weaknesses. Because of my house, which lies in ruins, while each of you runs to his own house. Therefore, the heavens above you have withheld the dew, and the earth has withheld its fruit. This is something that we see in the whole world nowadays. Even the fruit that the land gives, which is enough for everybody in the world, which is a lot. Even the food that is given is nothing compared to what it gave 2,000 years ago, what it gave 4,000 years ago, what it gave at the beginning of creation. What we are receiving from the earth now is nothing. And even what it gives has almost no taste compared to the taste that it had back in the day. Therefore, the heavens above you have withheld the dew. So when it doesn't rain, represents punishment because of the sins of the people. Rain doesn't fall, the dew doesn't come down. Remember, the Mashiach is like the dew, the early rain, because he is the manna, the heavenly bread that came down like the dew, and then they would come out and see the manna all over the place. And the earth, as in the last, withheld its fruit, ben porat, like we just saw, the fruit that comes out of the branch. So that which the Father is doing through the first and the last, through the spirit of testimony and the spirit of truth, is not able to give fruit or bless because of the sins of the people, because they are not given a place in their hearts for Yahweh. They are allowing another one to enter. And I called for a drought on the land. Just like it says regarding the two witnesses, that they have the power to shut up the heavens so that rain doesn't fall during their testimony. And I called for a drought on the land and on the mountains. Since Yahushua is the water of life, the apostasy is a drought. The falsehood in which most people are is that drought, which is also prophesied by Amos, the prophet, and in Revelation during the third seal. And I called for a drought on the land and on the mountains, and on the grain and on the new wine, the few and the many, grain and wine, and on the oil, as in, like if we talk about people, the few, the many, and the martyrs. If we talk about what, well, another representation of each of these would be the grain is the food that we receive from scriptures for our soul. The wine is the gladness, the joy that we receive through Mashiach, who died to forgive our sins and gave his blood as the third cup of Pesach, that of redemption. And the oil, the Ruach HaKodesh, with which he anoints us in order to understand scriptures and other things. So, and on whatever the ground brings forth, and on man and on livestock and on all the labor of the hands. Then Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and Yahushua, son of Yahutzadak, the high priest, with all the remnant of the people, obeyed the voice of Yahweh their Elohim, and the words of Haggai the prophet, as Yahweh their Elohim had sent him. And the people feared the presence of Yahweh. So look how it says, then Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, as in the last, whom people asked for, and Yahushua, son of Yahutzadak, the high priest, as in this case, Eliyahu, the other witness. Look also how it says Yahushua, son of Yahutzadak. Zerubbabel would be the witness like Moshe, and the witness like Moshe is the one who is going to be called Yahweh Sitkenu, which is Yahweh our righteousness. Yahutzadak is Yahweh is righteousness. So the fact that it says Yahushua, son of Yahutzadak, refers to Yahushua being a son spiritually of the last, the witness like Moshe, just like I have mentioned regarding Eliyahu being the son of the last, spiritually speaking, of course. So that's why Yahushua, son of Yahutzadak. And I have mentioned also how Eliyahu and Yahushua are connected. Eliyahu represents Yahushua, and Elishua, the successor of Eliyahu, represents the witness like Moshe, the last. That's why with the name Eliyahu and Elishua, we get Yahushua, who said, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. So The fact that Eliyahu represents Yahushua in certain contexts, and the fact that we have Yahushua, son of Yahutzadak here, would refer in one of the interpretations to Eliyahu, and the spiritual son of Yahweh Tzidkenu, represented by Zerubbabel right here, son of the one asked for by the people. So then Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, and Yahushua, son of Yahutzadak, the high priest, with all the remnant of the people. The remnant, meaning representing the chosen few, the remnant, as they are called throughout the prophecies, obeyed the voice of Yahweh. This is important because first it said that the word of Yahweh came to Haggai. The word of Yahweh came to Haggai. The word is Yahushua the first. We have word of Yahweh. But now they say to have obeyed the voice of Yahweh. Yahushua the first is the word, the last is the voice. That's why Mashiach said, I am the gate, the door, and the shepherd. So Yahushua came first as the door, now as the shepherd, and the sheep listen to the voice of the shepherd and recognize him through the teaching, not through appearances. So they obey the voice of Yahweh, their Elohim. Who? The remnant. Only the 144,000 will listen to the voice, for they are his sheep. And their obey the voice of Yahweh, their Elohim. And the words of Haggai the prophet, as Yahweh their Elohim had sent him. And the people feared the presence of Yahweh. Also, the fact that this is being said to the two witnesses by a prophet called Haggai could be referring to the two witnesses starring their witness, their testimony during a feast. His feast. When did Yahweh as the first die? On Matzot. So that would make reference to the two witnesses starring on Matzot. And the people feared the presence of Yahweh. So that means that the presence was there, represented by the two witnesses. And Haggai, the messenger of Yahweh, spoke the messenger of Yahweh to the people, saying, I am with you, declares Yahweh. In fact, since Haggai is speaking this way and the word of Yahweh is coming through him, and Zerubbabel and Yahushua representing the two witnesses, then Haggai could be Yahushua who died on his feast. And as we know, Yahushua is called Emmanuel, the presence of Elohim with us. So that's why. And the people fear the presence of Yahweh through the word being in Haggai. And Haggai, the messenger of Yahweh, spoke the message of Yahweh to the people, saying, I am with you, declares Yahweh. How powerful. May that be true now as well. I am with you, declares Yahweh. Vayomer Haggai, Malach Yahweh. This is interesting because he's being called a Malach, an angel. Vayomer Haggai, Malach Yahweh. V'malachut Yahweh le'am. Here it is. Ani itchem. Ani itchem. I am with you. Neum Yahweh, declares Yahweh. Ani itchem. And Yahweh stirred up the spirit of Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, governor of Yehudah, and the spirit of Yahushua, son of Yahutzadak, the high priest, and the spirit of all the remnant of the people. And they came and worked on the house of Yahweh of hosts, their Elohim. So this refers to the two witnesses being stirred up to begin their ministry. Now, remember how we saw the name Artaxshasta, that it meant I will stir myself up in the winter. And we talked about how that could connect with the last stirring himself up, or Yahweh stirring the last during the winter in order to begin during spring, which is when Matzot happens. We see the term that Yahweh uses, and Yahweh stirred up the spirit of Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel. So that's when the two witnesses will be stirred up in order to begin their ministry. Governor of Yahudah and the spirit of Yahushua, son of Yahutzadak, and the high priest, and the spirit of all the remnant of the people. Therefore, Yahweh will also stir up the 144,000 for them to begin to look for the Most High through the two witnesses, obviously through Mashiach, which will be taught by the two witnesses, testified of, as they are his witnesses. And they came and worked on the house of Yahweh of hosts, their Elohim. On the 24th day of the 6th month, in the second year of Dariawesh, the sovereign, on the 24th of the 6th month, which, if we go to the calendar, 24th, here it is, the 175th day of the year, the 24th of the 6th month. And you can see the star right here. So then if you go to the 6th month, which is that of the tribe of Gad, we have on the 24th, Haggai, first chapter, verse 15. So we see how the word began on the 1st, but it went all the way to the 24th when they began the building. Interesting that it referred to the remnant, the two and the remnant, and their everything that happened there, we could say happened during these 24 days, which connects with the 24 prophets mentioned in Thomas, who happened to be as well the 24 elders around the throne of Mashiach the Lamb. So that's how that chapter ends.